That's disappointing to us too. Okay, it's October the 16th, 2020. I'll call the meeting of the Administration and Audit Committee to order at 8:30 a.m. I would also like to ask as a courtesy that you all silence your cell phones and mute your connection if you joined us on Teams until you're ready to speak. Each director received notice of this meeting. The public meeting notice was properly posted as required by law. Directors, for the attendance record, when your name is called, please unmute yourself and let us know that you are here. Nancy, Lisa, please call on each committee member to record the attendance.
Okay, Chairman Huber, you are here.
Here.
Director Rankin.
Yes, here.
Director Boren. Director Crone.
Here.
Director Sanderson. Presiding Officer Flores.
Here.
Director Tallis.
Here.
Director Taylor.
Here.
And we heard from Sanderson. You said Boren will be a little bit late, right?
Yes, and Sanderson did indicate that he would be here. We can follow up on that.
Okay. So do we have a quorum then?
We have to have, was it Laura Lee, 2/3, 1/3? Matt, chime in. So we have 3 of the 5.
Is that considered a quorum, Larley?
Let me verify. One moment, please.
Sure.
Looks like Laura Lee just joined.
She's checking on the quorum rule right now.
Hey, this is Riley. Quorum is 1/3 for a committee.
All right.
Well, thanks, Riley. So we have a quorum then.
Yes.
Good. Okay. Quorum of the committee is present. We will now move to the public comment section of our agenda. For those commenting, please note that the committee may not deliberate items that are not posted on our agenda. Additionally, we do not plan to place a time limit on public comment unless we feel the time being taken is affecting others' ability to address the committee. At this time, we have no one signed up to speak. Is there anyone out there who did not sign up that wishes to address the committee? Very well, we will now proceed to the regular agenda. We're proceeding to agenda item number 1, which is discussion and possible action on administration and audit committee investment advisor selection. And I'll turn the meeting over to our Chief Financial Officer, David Thompson, to explain how this works and to introduce our guests.
Thank you. Oh, I see Alan has just joined, so that's good. Good. Yes, we're going to have 3 firms today, and in those 3 firms, they get 30 minutes of presentation and 15 minutes of questions. So, and I will be loading the slides, and then you can prompt me on what slide number you want me to go to. So the first firm that we have is Valley View. And let me share my screen. Please let me know if you can see the screens.
Yes.
Yes, I can.
Okay. So I will turn it over to Dick Long if he wants to start off, and I'll let you have 30 minutes now.
Great. Thank you, David. Again, my name's Dick Long. Also on the line from Valley View are Susan Anderson and Emily Upshaw. We'll get into our full team a little bit later, but we've probably been the 3 most active with the authority. in addition to some of our accounting folks, but that's why the three of us are on the call today. If you want to go down to the page 2, I guess by page number. Just a little bit of background. Again, we weren't sure how many folks on the committee or on the staff there were familiar with what we did and how we did it, but we are a registered investment advisory firm. We started the firm back in 1998. All of us on the team have worked for much larger firms, and one of the main reasons we started Valley View and have continued to grow it is the flexibility and the lack of large firm constraints that sometimes get placed on providing what we think is the right advice and consultation for our clients. So we won't go into everyone's background very deeply, but if you did see our response to the RFP, you'll see that we all have very extensive backgrounds and are intimately involved with the Texas Public Funds Investment Act, or PFIA for short, and local governments in Texas. We have folks in the Austin area, in the Dallas area, and up in the Fort Worth area. A few of us have scattered about. You can see our official office of record and registration is Huddleston, Virginia. Not a very large area. It's quite rural, as a matter of fact, but I was based in Dallas. My wife was transferred to the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We met and married. I should say my wife-to-be. We met and married, and she was from this area. And when the internet came along, she lobbied for me to commute to Texas to keep the business going. So even though we are officially registered out of Huddleston, Virginia, almost all of our business is in Texas and with Texas local governments. We specialize in cash and investment management. Susan Anderson was with the City of Austin a number of years, full career. As a matter of fact, she helped draft the Public Funds Investment Act. I've been intimately involved in it since 1988. It was officially adopted in 1987. So we deal with anything cash-related, investment management-related. We deal with banking services. We do policies and procedures. We help invest quite a bit of tax-exempt bond proceeds and coordinate the investment strategy with the arbitrage rebate regulations, which unfortunately has not been much of an issue lately, as investment yields are quite a bit below your bond issuance yields. But that is an important consideration. Next slide. Again, we have quite a few clients, cities, school districts, special districts, and authorities, BRA being one of them, community colleges. Just casually, I looked at a few of our clients throughout your basin. So we deal with Glen Rose ISD, Georgetown, Round Rock, Hewitt, Robinson, Hutto, Temple, Killeen. So we seem to have a few folks in your watershed, and so it kind of keeps it all integrated. We don't have limitations from a portfolio standpoint, particularly from the small side. We think it's important that communities like Hewitt and Robertson need just as much help as the larger ones. We have chosen not to go for the very large portfolios, the billion-dollar type portfolios. We think that distracts from being able to service the rest of our clients. Your portfolio, kind of bouncing either side of that $100 million range, is right in our bailiwick and our sweet spot of the portfolio where we think we can provide the best advantage. We'll do with any of your funds operating, CIP, capital improvement type money, debt service reserve fund money, Water Development Board money. We deal with the escrow accounts that are occasionally set up for those. So anything that you might have on the cash investment side, we've dealt with and will continue to deal with. We do it, as it says there, on a team approach. There's three of us on the call. You'll hear from each of us. When we get down a couple of more slides, we'll introduce you to the whole team. But all of us understand each of the client's needs. We have regular communication. We have a big team call every week where we go client by client. And we think it's very important that if Susan's not available, Melissa can call me. If I'm not available, she can call Emily. If Emily's not available, she can call Johnny. And any of us on the list can help the authority with whatever the need is at the time. Probably one of the biggest points there is the unbiased investment recommendations. We are not affiliated with any pools. We're not affiliated with any brokerage firms. We're not affiliated with any banks. Anybody that might provide you an investment choice. And so that when we recommend something to the authority, we're very confident that it is unbiased and that we truly do believe that it's in your best interest. And when we look at your portfolio mix a little bit later, you'll see that it's probably quite a bit different than any of the other folks that you're going to interview. And most of the reason it's different is because we're willing to look at some of those other choices that take a little bit more time and effort to properly set them up to safely put them in your portfolio. but they have had substantial advantage for you. And so that's one of the reasons we left the large corporate entity, because we felt restricted from being able to be more flexible with how we handle things. And so that's a key component. And we've been very, very fortunate to work with the authority since 2008, and we think that it's been a very successful relationship, and we're looking forward to continuing. Next slide, we'll give you the whole team. So upper left-hand corner, myself, Susan, Emily, Ben, we're the main four that do the investment advisory strategy implementation component. Others can. Tom's registered, EK's registered, several others are registered, and they can provide it. But the four of us are the ones that work most closely with the actual portfolio and the implementation. Upper right-hand corner, you've got EK Huffstetler, Tom Ross, Tim Pinnon. EK and Tim are former bankers, and so they've been very, very effective in negotiating from the client side with the bankers about appropriate accounts to set up, good policies and procedures, good interest rates, and so they're very involved in everything from looking at current account analysis statements and providing recommendations about how maybe the authority should move some money around, to when we do the full banking RFPs and helping you select a good choice. Down in the lower left-hand corner, our two main accounting reporting people are Johnny Pfeiffer and Teresa Mendoza. Johnny's a former CFO of the city of Keller. Teresa was the first lieutenant to the CFO at a large transportation authority. So again, very, very strong backgrounds. Emily, when you read her bio, is a CPA. As I mentioned, Susan's put in a full career and a half dealing with treasury management issues at local governments. And so we have a very strong accounting and reporting background, and we think we've been able to provide the authority the items that they need. Lower left-hand corner, we have Corrine Steger, who also helped draft the Public Funds Investment Act. She's in, I'll say, a semi-retirement mode, but she is very helpful to us from an administrative standpoint and from a thought-provocative standpoint. And then, again, Julie Gerhardt has spent probably almost 30 years, I don't want to exaggerate her age, 20 years in the investment business, and has been working with Valley View now about the last 10. So, again, good experienced group, all focused on public entities, and like I said, almost all of our clients are in Texas, and that's where our focus is. We're going to get into some of the things that we actually do, and we thought we'd let Emily jump in and kind of walk you through the way we've handled transactions on behalf of the authority. David and Melissa, I sort of semi-apologize. You've dealt with us a lot on a day-to-day basis, so some of this will seem routine to you, but we thought many of the committee members might not understand exactly what we do, so we thought it would be important to go through those issues.
All right, so can we move to slide 5, please? So we want to take you through our investment approach for those of you that are not familiar with how we do this. All of our decisions are based on client-specific historical cash flows. So we're projecting forward what your cash needs will be. We're not buying a large investment and then divvying it up among clients. Every investment that we place is client specific, and we're looking to place investments when you know you need cash coming in the door. So your current staff has a great cash flow model that we've been using, and we're able to place investments. And Susan will go through the type of investments we're placing a little later. But it's very important that we're focused on the client specifically. We also evaluate your investment policies and procedures. At least annually, we're going through your investment policy, making sure that everything's in compliance with current state law. And also, if there's any efficiency issues that are coming up, we can help. We have so many people that have been involved with governments that we can help if there's any procedure that needs assistance to try and make it more efficient for all of your staff. We're constantly keeping a pulse on the market. We always discuss it on team calls when we have them each week. We also send out a monthly outlook to keep clients up to date. But it's really important that we keep watching what's happening, particularly in today's environment. Susan had been calling clients since December of 2019 to let everyone know that we had seen an inverted yield curve and that we needed to prepare should rates fall. And that's exactly what happened. No one could predict what was going to happen with COVID-19, but luckily the authority was in a really good place. Investments had been placed along the way, structuring it just the way we had discussed. That way the portfolio could survive something like this. We always develop investment strategies and portfolio structure recommendations with the assistance of staff. We always want them to know what's going on and understand exactly what we're trying to accomplish. And then we always analyze new investment options that are out there. We have to make sure that they're risk appropriate. We don't want to be taking any undue risk with any of the authority's funds. So we always analyze and make sure that they're appropriate. And when we finally move into implementing the approved strategies, we're always doing it with staff. They're always aware of what we're doing and what we're trying to do to make that portfolio grow. And then finally, we're monitoring the portfolio structure and we're making any adjustments that are needed. One thing we'll talk about a little bit more is shifting, for example, from local government investment pools to money market accounts at banks. The rates were much better. So just examples like that, when you're shifting your portfolio to take advantage of yield while keeping the investments risk appropriate. We'll go to the next slide, please. So some of our strategy implementation, like I said, we're always keeping staff in the loop as to what we're doing. All of the recommendations are communicated. We go through and we discuss the current market conditions with every solicitation that we're doing. We want you to be aware of what's going on and what might be going on in the future and how we can prepare the portfolio. We're providing the rationale. We're always going to discuss why we're doing something. We're not just going to place an investment just because we can. We want to have a reason for it. And we're always going to obtain investment officer authorization. Since we're non-discretionary, we are never, ever in control of your funds. We want to make sure that every decision is made with the knowledge of the investment officers. It's important that you, as the authority, maintain control of your funds. So we're never in that position to make a decision on your behalf. Finally, when we have completed approved trades, we're always doing this on a competitive basis. Every time we have funds that we can invest, we go out for a solicitation. Currently, we're using CDs, so we're sending our solicitation request out to about 30 or more banks across the state. We always want to make sure that we're having competitive results that come in. We're always working with other clients too, so we see these results come up pretty much every week, so we can keep tabs on what a competitive rate looks like and we can assist the authority with making those decisions. We're always documenting the results. Everything is done with an email paper trail. So should any information ever be needed, we can recover it via email. We provide the required data and documents. For example, if it's a new relationship with a bank, we'll go ahead and help set up the bank depository agreement, make sure that all of the proper documents are in place and all of the collateral is done correctly so that the authority's funds are always protected. And finally, we're monitoring the settlement. We're always in the background, keeping tabs on the correct paperwork to make sure that everything is being settled correctly. And if any questions come up, we're always there to jump in. But one thing that's important to us is that the relationships that the authority has is directly with the investment provider, for example, a bank or a broker. We want to make sure that you know who you're working with. That way, should any questions come up and we're unable to assist at any time, you know who you can contact. Or should we ever not be working with the authority, it's a good business continuity plan to be able to take that in-house and you know who you can contact in order to continue your business. So we think those relationships are important and we make sure that you know who the parties are. Next slide, please.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, back one.
I was just going to make one more comment related to this transaction. All funds are handled by the authority directly to the provider, that we're not involved in touching any money, and nothing flows through our trading desk or anything like that. It's in your control from the day you get it to the day you invest it to the day it comes back at as a maturity.
All right, we can move one forward. Thank you. So additionally, we're always researching, evaluating, and making recommendations for any investment that we feel is necessary. For example, Susan will take you through what was done to the portfolio, but in general, we converted the portfolio from securities positions to financial institution deposits, primarily fixed rate, fixed maturity CDs. Rates were much more favorable with the CD investments, so we started moving that direction. We're also using a lot of money market accounts or NOW accounts, which are negotiable order of withdrawal accounts. We started moving local government investment pool funds to those types of accounts because they were paying much higher. They are considered liquid accounts, so it was just a much more favorable option for the authority. We also prepare the custom BRA, PFIA compliant reports. So we're always doing monthly accounting reports. We use a system called Tracker. So every month a template is sent to staff and they return it to us so we can input all of the transactions into Tracker. And the authority staff then has access online so you can go on and run reports anytime they're needed. We also prepare the quarterly portfolio reports that are compliant with the PFIA to make sure that everything is reported properly to the board. We're also available to present quarterly reports, market outlooks, or anything that's needed to the board or committees as is requested. I know in the past, Susan had been attending meetings on a quarterly basis to make sure that everybody was on board with the direction we were moving. I think now she attends annually, at least to go over your investment policy and any updates, and to give you a market outlook for the coming year. And finally, one of the services that we include in our contract is the primary depository bank RFP, should you choose to use one. There had been one done in 2011 and 2015. And this year it was determined that we were going to go ahead and extend the contract because of the favorable terms, particularly in the environment we're in. But we determined the requirements of the RFP, we draft it, and once the RFPs are returned, we do the evaluation. We evaluate all of the services that are available and cost analysis so the authority can make an informed decision. We assist with any contracts or transitions that are needed should that come up for a new primary depository bank. And then we also assist with an annual extension option procedure. We always keep a calendar. We look at any expiration dates coming up so we can keep the authority informed and draft any letters that are needed to extend the contract or what have you. But we feel that the primary depository bank service is important because all of your investments begin really with cash management at your primary depository bank. You want to make sure that you have a competitive deal, and it's important. It's just an important building block for your portfolio overall. So we make sure that that's a service that we provide to all of our clients. And as we go on to the next slide, Susan's going to take us through where your portfolio was and where it is currently and what we've done over the past 12 years that we've worked with the authority.
Right. I'll take you back to where we started, which was in November of 2008. And ironically, the market conditions were very similar to what we're seeing today. We had just had a market crash a few months earlier due to the subprime mortgage situation. So interest rates had fallen pretty dramatically, not quite so dramatically as they have fallen this year, but still very dramatically compared to where the rates had been. At that point in time, you had a really high rate of liquidity when we took over. You had about 27% of your portfolio in either investment pools or cash in the bank. So you were very susceptible to the falling interest rate environment. Also, 33% of the portfolio were in agency callables. Now, what those are, they're securities that when they're issued, the issuer has the option that if interest rates go up, they will hold on to that particular obligation until maturity. But more importantly, when interest rates go down, they have the option of refunding that or calling it so that you get your money back when interest rates are falling and you don't get to hold on to the interest rate that they had obligated you for until maturity. So essentially what happens is when you have a decline in interest rates, suddenly that particular security is called away from you, so you lose that higher interest rate that you had been obligated, and you're now investing in a very short or small interest rate environment. So essentially, you really need to look at a callable in this kind of an environment is essentially a very cash heavy situation. So within your portfolio, you only had 35% in securities that had any kind of a long-term maturity date. If you can look at the graph below, you can see that everything in your portfolio was going to be maturing within about 10 months. And then some of those agencies were called even more quickly than that. So you were very exposed to falling interest rates, and you had a very erratic maturity ladder. That's being that you hadn't really been matching your cash flow needs to the investments that you had in place over a longer period of time. And we also looked back, and it looked like you had a very irregular timing when you made your purchases. So that's the environment that we entered, and we realized that we really needed to do some updating and some changes in philosophy and strategy pretty quickly to be able to hold on to any kind of interest rate in a falling rate environment. So next slide. We'll bring you forward all the way up to the end of August. You still have cash and pools, but it's only about 5% of the entire portfolio. As Emily mentioned, 31% of the portfolio are in money market account and now accounts at banks. Those accounts are yielding about 10 to 30 basis points above pools. And also the rates that you're getting there are about the same as a 1 year or beyond CD. So you're getting a very high rate of return, but still preserving liquidity should you need it. When we see the market changing, we will adjust to take more of that money into CD land whenever those CD rates catch up with where the money market account is. But right now you're doing better off by keeping your money there and holding on to a pretty good rate of return at that point. You have no callables. We really, it's not within our philosophy and our strategy to hold a lot of callables. We really look at your cash flow needs. We match those cash flows with maturities, and we don't want something to happen where that's called away and suddenly you have an obligation that's not covered because of the call. So the laddered portfolio that we structure enhances your overall return because you're addressing the entire yield curve and getting the higher rate of return that you can lock in the longer run maturities. And that really helps sustain you when we have an environment like we have today, when the floor kind of is pulled out from under us and you don't have much option for investing at really high rates of return any longer. As Emily mentioned, we do cash flow modeling. Now, Melissa has an excellent cash flow model that she's used for years. So we work in the background with her. We talk her through some of the things that we're seeing, and she gives us good input on when she needs money to be maturing. And we talk about how those particular maturities will enhance the overall return of the portfolio. Strategic purchases means that we're sensitive to interest rate trends. If you see interest rates going up pretty quickly, perhaps you don't want to stretch all the way out to 2 years. Maybe you want to keep it a little bit shorter to always be able to get a higher rate of return on any new investment. However, when you see something like what we've seen over the past 6 months, you want to go out and maximize as much as you can, getting those longer term investments without jeopardizing your cash on hand when you need to pay obligations. Next slide, please. So side by side, you can see that in 2008, you had way too much liquidity as opposed to what you have in 2020. Excuse me, your weighted average maturity back then was 246 days. That takes into consideration your callable positions that were maturing much longer term, but in fact were called away. When you look at the WAM to the call date, you can see what impact callable has on the portfolio. It looks at the weighted average maturity, looks at the final stated maturity. The WAM to call date looks at the first opportunity that the issuer has to call that away. And you can see that your portfolio was really, really being put in jeopardy by the fact that interest rates were falling, and your WAM should really be considered to be more like 86 days. In fact, all the calls were implemented and you were very, very cash heavy by the end of 2008. By 2020, your average maturity is 143, the same to the call date because you have no callables, excuse me, in the portfolio. So it's a very stable portfolio, which as a governance, you would want to have a stable investment portfolio. You don't want to have whipsaws that would happen if you were way too liquid in an economy where interest rates are shifting lower. Next slide, please.
Do want to mention you have about 5 minutes left.
Okay, I'll rush through this really quickly. So the next slide, side by side, you can just see that your portfolio maturities are staggered out all the way out to 2022, which will help you hold on to some of these yields. Next slide. The reason I put in this next slide is that you can see that we've had some really portfolio shifts over time that was orchestrated by the authority. You had a lot of money come in during a certain stage where you had the Possum Kingdom Lake and some bond redemptions that caused a whipsaw. The thing I would mention here is that even during these whipsaws, because there was a plan to accommodate that, you had a very steady rate of return even during that whipsaw in the size of the portfolio. Next slide, please. So finally, what I'd like to show here is over time since 2008, how your portfolio has performed. The blue line is your portfolio. You currently have a WAM of about 5 months, the weighted average maturity. So everything else in your benchmark is just collapsing over time. Your current portfolio yield as of September was 1.14. You compare that to what you can get in a current security right now, a 10-year is 0.734. So your yield is much higher than the current 10-year, and you'll hold on to that for a little bit longer due to the fact that we've got some longer-term positions in your portfolio. But over time, your portfolio has achieved a very good rate of return. So I'll turn it back over to Dick for a wrap-up.
Sure, and just to add some numbers to it. So, and with the caveat, you shouldn't choose an investment advisor totally based on return. You should have a similar philosophy, and particularly, as Emily mentioned, a similar risk-return outlook on how the portfolio should be managed. But we've been fortunate, and the authority's been good to work with, and we think we've managed the portfolio fairly effectively. Over the time that we've been involved, your portfolio's averaged a little bit over $100 million, and TexPool, which is kind of the default investment choice for many governments, had an average yield of about 65 basis points through that time frame. Excuse me, about 60 basis points. And your portfolio had an average yield of about 1.25. So that's almost $700,000 a year difference in interest income on a $100 million portfolio. Even if you had maintained a ladder of 1-year treasuries, you still would have picked up about 45 basis points in yield, or almost $500,000 a year. So again, yield is not the most important decision factor, but we are grateful that your portfolio has done well. We've been able to implement quite a few things that has kept your risk return on the safe side of any risk, but on the better side of any return. So again, I guess the last page, our summary. Again, once again, we're a Texas-focused registered investment advisory firm. We've been very fortunate to have 12 plus years with BRA, and we're very grateful for it. As you mentioned, our philosophy and strategy is to be as flexible and client-friendly as possible, to work within the market environment, work within the board's environment, work within the staff's environment, to keep everyone comfortable that we are doing the right things. We do it on a very independent analysis basis. We're not linked to anyone. We are not beholden to any pools or portfolios or trading desks. And one of the things Susan didn't get to spend much time on is discipline. When rates are going up, it's important to keep moving. When rates are going down, it's important to keep moving. By stalling or trying to over-anticipate which way the market's going to go, that's when portfolios get hammered the most. So we think it's very important to maintain the discipline as things go up and down. And then, as Emily spent a lot of time on, effectively communicating with staff and making sure that what we're doing is in line and appropriate for all the parties involved. Was that fast enough, David? Did we get within our time frame?
You got it. You had about 10
Okay.
seconds left. So now that we'll open up for questions for the next 15 minutes. Are there any questions from the committee members?
I do have one question on this end. It's all right. The what I saw the graphs, they're very good. You did a good job on the graphics and all that. What do you typically do on an ongoing basis for your benchmarking, and how do you typically select where you're going to fall on the WAM curve, just within guidelines and this and that, and how tightly do you plan your repricing and your these sorts of things as they relate to anticipated cash flow needs?
Susan, do you want to go through that since you and Melissa work most closely on that?
Sure. I would say the most effective thing that we do with Melissa is to look at when you need your next cash maturity. She looks very closely at what her obligations are, and we try to make sure that the obligations are covered by a maturity. So as you go along, what you will see is when she compares her needs with the availability of cash, that she's always got everything covered. So the strategy ongoing is cash flow based. We don't really pay, as Richard mentioned, a whole lot of attention to what's going on in interest rates, except that if we see a massive change or a change that's really going to impact the portfolio, we might say, look, interest rates are going up, so even though you've got some maturities out or some needs out beyond a year and a half, as an example, maybe we don't want to cover those fully yet. Maybe we want to keep it a little bit more cash heavy right now and then cover those as the environment changes a bit. But primarily we try to stick with our discipline of cash flow matching over time. Now, you mentioned when we would reprice or change that. I would say if we saw dramatic change coming down the pipeline, particularly if it's a massive change with lowering interest rates, then we would want to really push the discipline a little bit harder to match those longer term and work perhaps a little bit backward than what we would normally work. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, somewhat. As to benchmarking, what do you typically do for benchmarking?
Okay, one of the things I really have liked to look at is I like to look at what the weighted average maturity is of the portfolio, because again, it's cash flow based. So when you build it out, right now your weighted average maturity is about a 5-month. I try to look at what a commensurate 5-month benchmark would be. On your graph, you see that we typically use a 6-month Treasury and a 1-year treasury. So your portfolio would fall within that time frame. If you were to shift your portfolio a little bit longer and have some longer term maturities, then I think it would be appropriate. And in some cases, for some of our clients that have a little bit longer term focus, we might have a 1.5-year treasury based benchmark. It really is more client driven and the needs of that client. We always put tax pool in there as a benchmark because if you didn't do anything else, you should at least get a tax pool yield. And then beyond that, we try to match it to the portfolio's objectives in terms of their WAM, and then match that into what a typical yield would be for that WAM.
And just for additional information, so your investment policy restricts the weighted average maturity to a year or less. So that's why the 6-month and the 1 year, those are rolling treasury portfolios, not static portfolios, but they're a rolling portfolio based on the weekly statistics that come out of the Federal Reserve Bank.
Right. One other quick follow-up question, or maybe two. The second one's going to be, for those ones you're going to have to dance around a little bit, but it's okay, all right? There's no hidden anything to that second question. But do y'all ever consider, what are the pluses and minuses, let's say, of using a CDARS program, both in terms of the laddering aspects, the safekeeping aspects maybe, and then the ability to utilize overnight funds and just the ease of mobility of the funds? What are the pluses and minuses of a CDARS program in those respects?
Yeah, CDARS is a great program, and we've used it. CDARS stands for Certificate of Deposit Account Registry Service, and for the non-financial folks, it's a spreading program where the deposit in any individual, the authority's deposit in any individual financial institution is FDIC insured up to $250,000. And the CDARS program, which has been opined by the FDIC as acceptable and legitimate, will allow you to place, say, for instance, $1 million at First National Bank, to use a name, and then First National Bank will keep $250,000, then spread $250,000 around to 3 other banks, so the full deposit is FDIC insured. The authority has used CDARS. It also has a companion program called ICS, Insured Cash Sweep, which is a money market-based product. Same concept of you send a bunch of money to one bank and then it gets spread around. It's all based on computers so that the FDIC insurance covers the full deposit. From the authority standpoint, a CDARS CDs is a one-bank transaction. You don't have to list all the individual banks that it gets spread to. You don't have to monitor all the banks as long as the balance in each of those banks stays below 250. So generally those allocations are not at 250, they're at 245 or maybe 240, so that there's room for the interest to accumulate within the CD and still be covered by the FDIC. The pro of CDARS is its easy, standardized documentation. The bank sets its price, so there's not a national price. It's individual by bank. They all settle on Thursdays. If Thursdays is a good working day, they all mature on the Thursday 6 months from now, 12 months from now, whenever the maturity is established. The one drawback to CDARS is the prepayment penalties. If you did need to withdraw from a CDARS CD prior to maturity, depending upon the original term, the prepayment penalty could be all or almost all of your interest income. So they are a good product, but you do need to be very confident that you're not going to have to redeem it early. If you place a regular CD, a direct placed CD with a local bank, if it's above FDIC insurance, they'll pledge collateral, as in marketable securities, and we assist Melissa with the monitoring of the market value of that collateral, or they might use a Federal Home Loan Bank letter of credit. If you have to redeem one of those CDs early, it's more of a negotiation with the bank. In most cases, the banks will let you redeem it with interest through the date of redemption without penalty. but occasionally a bank will require some sort of a prepayment penalty if you do get out of the CD early. So that's the biggest issue with Cedars is it's very structured, and if you have to redeem early, there is a substantial prepayment penalty.
But certain, if each CD is kept at a certain level, you can mitigate that risk as well, right?
Correct, and that's back to Susan's comment of cash flow based. So I can tell you, working with Melissa, if she says I can go 12 months, we are very, very confident that that money's not going to be needed for at least 12 months. So
right.
yeah, there would be little hesitation. If your whole portfolio was Cedar CDs, we might need to look at diversifying a little. But to have a few Cedars here or there, it'd be very acceptable.
I would say that the other drawback that I see sometimes is the inflexibility sometimes of the maturity date. You know, as Dick mentioned, they offer 6 month, 9 month, 12 month, and sometimes if you need a more customized date, Cedars doesn't work very well. The other thing is when we send out solicitations, when you have a new investment need, we send it out to probably about 30 banks in your region, and we give them the option, each bank, of using Cedars. So we're always getting banks to offer Cedars rates. More often than not, though, they've been a little bit below the direct CD. So, you know, those are just some considerations that we take, but we allow banks to offer Cedars all the time.
Good morning, this is Cynthia. This is Cynthia Flores. I want to say, Richard, Susan, and Emily, thank you so much for your presentation. You obviously have a great deal of knowledge, but I think the one thing that is very important to point out to the committee is that ultimately the BRA is responsible for how we want that portfolio to perform. So David, kudos to you and kudos to this organization and Valley View for making sure that our BRA voice is heard and that we are leaning to them for their professional opinion. But ultimately, David, thank you for your hard work over the years. I appreciated the history lesson today from 2008 to the current, and it's important that that we continue to make sure that we have great staff at the BRA to work with whichever organization that we select.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Long, Ms. Anderson, Ms. Upshaw, we appreciate your presentation. It's been very informative. And we need to move on to our next firm now and give them their time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very good.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
And if I could ask everyone to be sure their mics are muted whenever they're not speaking, because I'm getting quite an echo at times, which indicates that maybe someone's mic is on or picking up the speaker two different ways. Thanks.
Rick, is it possible you got something echoing? I don't hear an echo with anybody except you.
Say that again. You're echoing.
I'm not hearing an echo with anybody speaking except you.
Oh, okay. Am I echoing?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Courtney, what would be causing that?
Do you have a speaker very close to your microphone?
I'm on a laptop computer.
Hey, you might turn the volume down on the microphone. If you can get into the settings.
Yeah, I'll have to go in the settings and do that. I think I can do that. Go right ahead, and I'll be working on that.
Didn't hear an echo that time.
Okay. In about 5 minutes, we have, we have 10 more minutes. We'll have Patterson Associates joining us for their 30-minute presentation. I do want to remind the committee that at the end, we'll be ranking these groups 1, 2, and 3. So just as a reminder on that, and keeping good notes.
Am I any better now?
Yes.
Much better.
Oh, okay. Good. Yep. Thank you. David?
Yes. Let's get, I'm not sure if Linda is joined or David.
Rick, this bill, I just want to confirm that we can like have a break until 9:29.
We can do that. We're good. We got a break for 10 minutes then.
All right, thanks. And y'all can hear me okay, so if I ask a question, there's not any echoing or anything. And if I do this, you can see me also, right? All right, make sure I'm doing all this stuff correctly.
Everybody take 5 minutes or so and we'll start back up at 9:30.
Will do.
And during that time, Courtney, can you help me? I'm still getting an echo on everybody. I turned my input volume down on the computer, the microphone volume.
Well, now I'm not hearing an echo. Can you say something else?
I'm hearing an echo from everybody. That's my input volume though, keeps changing. If I bring it down in the talk, it starts coming back.
Let's see. I think what else it could be.
What's interesting is most everybody's muted, so it's weird.
Say again.
I said, I just turned my mic on, but it seems like most everybody's muted here, so it kind of like, okay.
Okay, I'm not sure what I need to do here.
I'm gonna send you an email.
Log in again.
You can try that, but I don't think that's going to help. I think it has something to do with your settings of the microphone or speaker. I can try to use TeamViewer to remote in your computer. If you go to teamviewer.com, and I'll send you an email to with the link to it.
Well, I'll just go to teamviewer.com. I don't get your email. Oh yeah, I'll get your emails on this computer. Yeah, that'd be fine.
Courtney, he was listed twice as attending. Would that make a difference?
No, that won't make a difference. No.
I removed one of them.
Okay.
Did you just do that?
Yeah, I just did it.
Oh, okay. I'm not hearing the echo now. That's got to be what it is.
Yeah.
I had sessions going.
You're loud and clear. You're good.
Great. Thank you very much. How do you do it, Courtney?
Ed is magic.
Yeah, you're not taking her away.
Don't ever leave, Courtney. Don't ever leave.
I believe I saw David join us. Is that you?
Yes, sir. I can hear you loud and clear.
Perfect. Is Linda on yet?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly. We're good. So we're probably still another 2 or 3 minutes away from getting started.
Okay. We were just making sure we could make the connection.
Do you see your slides?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
So just prompt me on what pages you want to go to, and I'll turn them for you.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
He's one of our best page turners.
That's very important right now.
I appreciate it. It's always a challenge to put the slides up there sometimes.
Yeah. I do that in my church sometimes, I know. And they always look at you if the wrong slide's up.
Yeah, it could be a little challenging.
Yep.
You're under pressure at church to get the right slide up at the right time.
That's right. They don't know what to sing if the wrong slide's up.
We're going from the first to the third stanza without any warning.
Yeah. That's what always throws you. And then they turn around and look at you like it's your fault. You got about a little over a minute and we'll come back to order and get started again.
Okay.
It's 9:30. We'll call the meeting back to order and turn it back over to Chief Financial Officer David Thompson.
Okay, we have David and Linda on the call here for Patterson Associates. So they will have till 10 o'clock for their presentation. From 10 to 10:15, we'll have questions and questions for that. So I'll turn it over to you, Linda.
All right. Thank you very much and good morning to all of you. I can't see your faces, but I know you're there. My name is Linda Patterson, and with me today is my associate, David McElwain. He is the portfolio manager who would be assigned to BRA should we be chosen to be your next investment advisor. And if we could go to the next slide. We've tried to put together a few important points, I think, about the firm and about how we operate and our people. We do appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all today and answer any questions. As you know from the proposal, we were established back in 1994 as a woman-owned business here in Texas, in Austin. After my long experience in public finance, we've had really steady growth and consistent growth through those 25 plus years. And I think it's because of our reputation for service and not sales, for service that's tailored to our clients. You know from the proposal what my background is, and the firm is really built on that experience and on that focus to make sure that there's good information, that there is safety for all of the portfolios that we are entrusted with. And we are fully independent. I don't know that any of you remember, but we would be very pleased to deal with BRA again and serve BRA again. We were actually from 2003 to 2008 your first investment advisor. Seems like a long time ago now. But we remain fully independent, and that allows us to tailor our services to your needs. One of the things that we really focus on is customer service and tailoring that customer service to you. And the way we do that is that we have a complete view to the treasury and to the markets, and working with all of our clients with policies to procedures, assuring daily smooth operations, and very importantly, communications with your staff. Our staff is small. We like it that way. And we control all aspects and phases of the service to you. So not only the manager that is assigned to you, but everybody else in the firm has a real good idea of what your priorities are and what your needs are, because we're constantly talking among ourselves. And because we have full control of all of the aspects of trading, we're not moving to a separate trading desk. We're not going through a separate trading desk. And we can assure that there's full competition and added value to the trades. We've been through, since 1994, many market cycles. And as you look back, you can imagine with 2001 and then 2008 and 9, the zero interest rates during the teens, and now back to a very challenging market. But because we can communicate with a large number of multiple firms and economists, we've been able to stay on top of those markets, and I think bring value to all of the people, all of our clients who need it. And we are fully scouring the markets. We really believe in looking across all the market sectors that you are authorized to invest in, and work with you through communications to find where that best value is. I think communications is really the key here. It's we try to keep it concise and useful. We don't like to spend too much of your time, and we know that you're very busy. But our priority remains your asset safety, but with a very proactive view to the markets. And the communications is key, because we're working with you as a full treasury support service, making sure that your policies and your procedures are up to date and are reflecting best practices in the financial area. And actually we work, and not only just work with other clients, but we participate in professional financial groups across Texas and also nationally, so that we can stay on top of the best practices and the best new ideas for you. The Treasury support, of course, goes from working with your policies and your procedures. We do a lot of work in in helping people make sure that their internal controls are in place, that they have full and really clear procedures that are very efficient. And we work with each one of them also in another two important areas, and that is custody and safekeeping, and also in your banking. We do a great deal of the banking for all of our clients. In fact, it comes as part and parcel. All of the Treasury support services come as part and parcel of a management agreement with Patterson. On the next slide, in your RFP, you were very clear on the scope and the requests and telling us what VRA's needs are today. And I can assure you that we can fulfill all of them. We have a very disciplined approach and procedures that are built into safety checks along the way, matrices on the trading desks in front of every manager, making sure that we know who your authorized broker dealers are, that we know what your authorized securities are, and staying within those parameters and constantly watching with a dual system, watching your portfolio so that we're fine tuning it all the time. And of course, always working with you, because we're very strong about being definitely a non-discretionary manager for you. Internal support, as I mentioned, we have a great deal of experience with safekeeping, risk monitoring, the cash flow, setting benchmarks, and so forth. The portfolio, we have many clients who have sub-portfolios, so we're very used to looking at those as either one combined portfolio or separate portfolios, which I think probably for Phil's BRAs needs a little more clearly. And looking to make sure that whether we're in a sub-portfolio or in a larger portfolio, that we are meeting compliance and diversification, meeting those objectives of the policy. External support comes naturally as part of this overall approach, and that is working with custodians, which has become a little more challenging over the last couple of years as custody changes and custody and safekeeping operations are bought and sold and moved into money center banks. We work with and help you choose brokers and banks and alternative investments. And David's going to mention a little bit about that, because as you go through different market cycles, then you have to look for different alternative investments that are giving you value, whether it's CDs at some point, or now that the bank's going down a little bit, not having loan demand, using municipal debt, commercial paper. One of the things that we also do that was mentioned in your RFP was we're very strong on education. That's always been a special bent for me, and we continue it. I train for TML, I train for multiple regional educational service centers for the ISDs in the state. And we have also, over the years, provided individual training, especially in a staff situation where there's a number of people who really want to be familiar, even if they're not investment officers, they're involved in the process. So we go in and provide that CPA approved training just for BRA staff. On the next slide, I'd like David to add here a little further to explain some of our strategies, how we work with you for a plan and continue to work with you with a dynamic strategy that is going to have to move as the market moves and changes. The points here obviously are clearly our macro strategy in keeping with your portfolio. And it's always a plan that's based and designed on your staff objectives and your management objectives and market parameters and needs. So David, if you can talk a little bit about strategy.
Absolutely. Thank you again for having us. I'm David McElwain. I joined Linda last year, early last year. But I've actually been on your side, wearing your shoes, actually as the investment manager for Harris County. I spent 10 years there, and subsequent to that, I was the treasury manager at the Port of Houston Authority, wearing a number of hats, doing both treasury and investments and dealing with retirement and pension assets and pension consultants. So I've got a very clear understanding of what your demands are there, and obviously with the fiduciary responsibility that you do have, and we're very sensitive to that. Obviously, Linda is one of the pioneers of helping write the Public Funds Investment Act. So we are very acutely aware of what the playing space is, what the parameters are generally, and obviously each client's individual policies can drill that down and create sometimes a more conservative model than PFIA allows for. But, you know, our primary responsibility is to be an extension of your staff, with the caveat being that all we do is 100% capital markets, investment consulting. And, you know, it's our lifeblood. I mean, to me, it's fun every day to see what's changing, where the deals are for my clients. And, you know, literally I'm the guy that's keeping my head down, seeing what new municipal bonds are being issued today, this week and next week. And just kind of giving you guys a roadmap of like, you know, here's the best thing we can do between 6 and 12 months. Here's the best thing we can do between a year and 2 years. But I think generally what we do is inside a normal portfolio, we create both a short-term ladder, you know, predominantly leaning on commercial paper, and short-term municipal bonds like bands or TANs to cover the short end of the curve. And then obviously we complement that sometimes with collateralized CDs if there's a good deal of value there. Sometimes right now we are leaning very heavily on municipal bonds because we're seeing a lot of issuance coming to market. And you can see the spreads widening out as all these underwriters see the deal flow coming, and they're offering some of these spreads that we're getting here just on 2 and 3 year paper are, you know, anywhere from 50% to 100% higher than a callable agency, which obviously callable agencies are typically a de facto spread product over the treasuries. And we all know how challenging the rate environment is with a 1 year T-bill at 0.12%, 2 year treasuries at a 0.14, and a 3 year treasuries at a 0.18. It's obviously every basis point counts for each of our customers. And, you know, we want to always focus on keeping your cash flows to meet your needs, both on the short end and then obviously using a little more, you know, just a little more discretion on those funds that are maybe more like reserve funds in nature, where we can go out and achieve a little longer duration, locking in a little higher yield, and complementing those two approaches to give you a portfolio that's ultimately very highly liquid, very, very safe. And, you know, it's obviously going to continue to give you the maximum amount of cash flow. We are going to report to you on both a monthly basis and produce your quarterly reports. I will avail myself for any of your quarterly meetings or any of your investment meetings, presentations. And obviously Linda and I can team up to do any training on an as needed basis. But, you know, it starts with you and us and kind of figuring out what your needs are, what you have been doing. And perhaps, you know, we can, you know, take what you have been doing and find a path that might even be more advantageous for you. And I'm quite confident we can do that. But we will, you know, always be looking at ways to make you more flexible and be able to take advantage of where the values are in the markets, because the markets change, as you know, very quickly. Prior to the COVID virus and the whole shelter in place, you know, we were predominantly buying collateralized CDs and callable agencies. And obviously those callable agencies, we want to spread out the quality of those agencies. We don't want to just continually focus on the highest yields with the shortest call periods. So, you know, we take everything under consideration. And when the market went into shelter in place, obviously we had equity markets rolling over and having very sharp corrections. And as a result of that, you had a situation where the baby was getting thrown out with the bathwater. A lot of people were selling municipal bond funds. And at one point, at the end of March, we were buying state of Texas tax anticipation notes, which are issued annually. We were buying the state of Texas TANs with anywhere from a 272 yield up to a 292 yield. And it was just bizarre. So we put over 125 million on our clients' books collectively in those state of Texas TANs, which it seemed like a gift at the time. But, you know, within a matter of 3 or 4 weeks, as the markets kind of calmed down, you know, those same TANs, those same notes for the state of Texas had dropped back down to like 30 or 40 basis points. So, you know, those are the things that we are acutely aware of on an ongoing basis. Wherever we see a need to kind of take advantage of something, we are going to communicate to you and all of our customers in a timely manner. And as soon as you give us the directive to act on your behalf, you can rest assured it'll be done as quickly as possible. And all the other byproducts of that, communicating your trade tickets, or even, you know, inputting the trades in some of the relationships we have. We have dual counterpart controls where we log in, we enter the trade details, and then it's queued up for you to log in and review the details, make sure they're accurate, and then you approve them for your safekeeping bank to obviously function in the delivery process. But I'm going to turn it back over to Linda, because again, I'm going to be your day-to-day guy on all of your investment needs. And Linda is obviously the mastermind behind the entire operation, and she's both a pleasure to work with, and her reputation precedes itself. And I was thrilled to death when I had the opportunity to join forces with her and be a part of her organization.
Thank you, David. I don't think I've ever been called a mastermind before, but I'll take it and run with it. The portfolio strategy, of course, that David is talking about, and all of us get so excited about in following the markets and looking for value. That's that we do live and breathe the markets, and we all enjoy it and work as a team together so that we're coming out with a good strategy. It allows all of us with eyes and ears in the markets to come back and talk in a campfire kind of situation, now virtually, so that we come out with a really good strategy that's going to fulfill different needs in different portfolios. That last point on there about the arbitrage planning and calculations, of course, we work with all public entities. So everyone is looking at arbitrage. And in fact, right now is a prime time during the year that the auditors and the calculators are working so that we are constantly being asked for and being able to provide the information that they need for the calculations on an ongoing basis. And we work with many different arbitrage providers, calculators, and providers so that we know that our systems can provide what they need. And speaking of that, on the next slide, accounting and reporting is a natural flow from the communications that we like to keep open with all of our clients. And our accounting and our reports have changed a lot. I was looking back in between.
Yes, ma'am. This is Alan Sanderson. Is Donna Gonzalez in today?
And 2008. And I'm sorry, I think David may have.
Director Sanderson, if you'd mute your phone, please.
He muted it.
I just didn't want to talk over anybody else. And I was looking back at when we were working with Brazos River Authority many years ago, and the portfolio has obviously grown, but both of us have grown with our expertise in accounting. And I think accounting is very important. David mentioned that we provide, of course, monthly reports, full monthly reports with economic information, a breakdown of asset allocation, and by maturity and by market sector, because we want to give you an entire picture, an analysis of the portfolio. Our whole aim here is information. Another thing that we do for all of our clients is we provide the GASB reporting at the end of the year, the Statement 31, Statement 40, and Statement 70. And so that is part and parcel of the accounting reports. I think that on the next slide, you can see we pulled out one of our one of our portfolios, and this was in the proposal also. But I think I wanted to make you understand that our reporting is very tiered. We start with an overall look at the market, what is influencing your portfolio, what's influencing the markets that we're working in for you. And then the reporting is tiered in such that we're looking graphically at how the portfolio is currently in place. And then this is an example of a current portfolio of ours. And management wise, we work with your committees or your boards, if you would like us to do that, to explain to them key points that we think are important for them to understand and to see as far as what the strategy is and how it's being followed in the market. For instance, on this one, this is the top tier of the reporting. So it's giving you a good look at exactly what the diversification is on the portfolio. And of course, a lot of you can see in there that this particular client uses different pools, which are, of course, their choice, but leading them into a good diversification, a good overall view, and it's reporting that's geared to your use. The reporting goes farther in that it is designed to give you a full look at the overall portfolio, then the overall look at each sub-portfolio. And of course, you can divide that any way you want. Our SimPro system is very flexible. We do not give online access to the portfolios. I'm very skeptical and very cautious about information and modification of information. So we can provide reports in an Excel format, but we really like to give you the finished product in an Acrobat so that we know that what we're giving you is what we know and that it has been confirmed all the way up and down the line, from trade tickets to confirmations to safekeeping receipts. On the next slide, you can see how we also, as part and parcel of the accounting, the summary and detail accounting that goes down through amortization schedules, through interest earnings, down to cash projections. We also try to give you on an ongoing basis market information, and we do this any way you want, usually in written form and also by email and whatever fits your schedule. And I'll turn it back to David to just give you in the last few minutes here, give you an idea of some of the information that we provide to you on an ongoing basis.
Do we need to forward to another slide, or are we just going to stay on this one here, Linda?
We can stay on this one and that, or if you want to move it.
All right, I apologize for that. Okay. Yeah, so thank you again for turning it back to me. The ongoing market communications are going to be, almost daily for most of my active clients. We can kind of tailor that to your needs if there's any specific time frame that you prefer to be communicated with, or those members of your staff that are dedicated to managing the portfolios. Obviously, we will keep you up to date on what's coming down the pipeline as far as what you have maturing. If you have callable agencies, as soon as we see the call notifications, we're going to let you know, hey, you've got $5 million being called next week on Wednesday. What would we like to start maybe targeting some ideas for those funds? And then, like I said, we're always going to keep you up to speed with what's happening in the markets on a weekly basis. You'll get a newsletter every Friday afternoon, kind of just summarizing what has transpired this week, what has influenced interest rates, upward or downward, or any other events which may be impacting capital markets in general. And then obviously we will, again, as part of those quarterly reports that we give you that we're used to presenting now via teleconference, but we will obviously avail ourselves when we get back to a normal environment where we do have meetings in front of your boards or your governing bodies. We're happy to, with some advance notice, schedule to be there in person, and when called upon, present the report and answer any questions that anyone may have, down anything from macro down to granular. But, again, it appeared to me when I reviewed your latest quarterly report that y'all were very heavily invested in, it looks like collateralized CDs, which you were able to lock in some advantageous rates before where we are now. But obviously there's a lot of complexity facing us as our maturities come due. And again, just trying to get the best bang for the buck without stretching you out too far duration wise. But we think it's going to be a very, very challenging environment for at least the next year to 2 years. We don't see any catalyst to shoot interest rates back up meaningfully. And I think the Fed is obviously going to kind of remain inside the box until we can completely get the COVID virus in the rearview mirror and try to get back to some normal economic activity where people are carrying on in their routines that they were pre-COVID. And I'm sure all of y'all feel the same way. But we are here for you guys, and we are always going to be as proactive as you'll let us be, and we are always going to be hopefully the best partner you've ever had once we start working with you.
One of the other points about the market information, and you can see it on the next page, I just threw in included in here on the next slide. I'm sorry.
Linda, you have about a minute.
Yeah. Information, I think the most important thing about information is that it is information that you can use, and it's information like this. This was just an excerpt from one of our monthly reports. And this next slide, also another excerpt from the monthly reports. We're trying to give you information that you can use, and we try to be very clear and concise about that. On the final slide, we do appreciate the opportunity to propose to serve the authority again, and we will be glad to answer any questions that we can about how we would operate or how we would very, very much like to serve the authority as your partner in Treasury management.
Thank you, Linda. Okay, we'll open it up to the committee for questions.
This is Chairman Huber, Mr. McElwain or Ms. Patterson, either one. I'm sure, I know you've read and are familiar, according to your proposals, with our investment policy at the BRA. And in order of priority at the very top after investment suitability is preservation and safety of capital, with the last and least important is yield. And you said both in your proposal and today that you rely heavily on commercial paper as well as other things. And of course, that's not even listed as an authorized investment in our investment policy. Our primary objective, of course, is preservation of capital and to avoid any capital losses, either from issuer defaults or erosion of market value. So I just wondered how you would advise us as far as our investment policy and how we might change it. I know our chief financial officer and his team are extremely conservative and really believe that public funds require a different approach than mine or your personal investments because they're so heavily scrutinized by the public. So if you might comment on that, I would appreciate it.
Absolutely. safety has to be number one. And what we always are going to do, and why David was talking about commercial paper as an example, is that we are looking at different segments of the market all the time. But safety is number one. You know from my resume that I was co-author of the Public Funds Investment Act, and that very clearly speaks to safety. And I have been a city treasurer since 1982 in Fort Worth. So that's very clear. And I hope we didn't sound too proactive, but what we do like to do is that your objectives, safety, liquidity, diversification, yield, really all of those come together for safety to make sure that, for instance, a liquidity buffer exists on the portfolio at all times and to meet any needs that might come up. Principal, the preservation of principal is first and foremost for us all, I can assure you. But sometimes you have to look, for instance, at the municipal debt, which is highest investment grade also. And I think that one of the things in communication and talking with our clients is looking at what they have authorized. And, many of them have gone to commercial paper, just like they have gone to the pools that have commercial paper, because this is a different situation, because you basically have a barbell where there is no value. You saw it on that next to last slide. It's a very flat curve. And so we tend to advance and educate our clients as to where we can add a little bit of yield, but yield is definitely the fourth one. But I think yield is also important because this is a very important asset, and it's an asset that should be used. It should be out there looking for the very best opportunities in the market.
Thank you. I think our board would need to be educated on that in order to make any changes. Thank you for the explanation. Very good. Are there other questions?
Yes, real quickly. With respect, give me just a brief rundown from your perspective on the advantages and disadvantages of using CDARS.
CDARS sometimes has a very good, of course, the advantage is that you're all FDIC insured. And you are going through that. That's the first thing. And second of all, that you are going in through a Texas bank. So that Texas bank and that deposit, doing it that way makes you a depositor. And under the terms and under the view of the FDIC and the Fed and actually of the Treasury also, depositors are very well protected. CDARS make a lot of sense when they are competitive to outside opportunities, and that's very much the case very often. Right now, they're not as competitive, but as to, for instance, something like commercial paper, but also to some of the prime pools. So I think you have to constantly be looking at different opportunities. But CDARS, I've known the CDARS people for a long time, and also they now have a sister program called ICS, which is a spread product for money market accounts, which is another good way. We've actually had clients that we had put them into a CDARS, to a CDARS CD situation, and I was very impressed because, and have talked to the CDARS folks many times, because there was a bankruptcy in the system, and of course it would happen on Thursday afternoon, and by Friday we had all the documentation, the money was moved, everything was settled back down again, and that speaks very well of CDARS. So I can't say enough about them, but sometimes it's time to use CDARS and sometimes it's not.
A couple of years ago, your firm, I think, entered into an agreement with the city of San Antonio. Is that correct?
Yes, we still have that agreement. I still act as their investment advisor, although we don't manage their funds, but I advise their investment officers and give them economic views on an ongoing basis. That has never stopped. It's been in place for 10 or 12 years.
What advantages do you feel like best accrued to the city of San Antonio when y'all entered into that agreement with them?
Oh, we have changed quite a bit at the city over those years. A couple of the things that come to mind immediately is that when I first started working with them, Ben Gazelle and some of the others recognized that they had a $1 billion portfolio and they weren't sure that they were utilizing the markets or had internal operations that were up to serving the city as well as it could. They were basically investing only in treasury bills, so only out to the 1 year area. We spent a great deal of time looking at their cash flow, and I built them cash flow models and analysis, and we could show where they needed to go out and extend and take. Now they invest clearly out to the 3 year area with a nice laddered portfolio. They also never used, at first, didn't use agencies. We introduced them to the agencies and how to diversify the portfolio with those agencies. And eventually, about 2 years ago, they started using commercial paper. In fact, I was on a call with them just yesterday with their staff, and we were talking about the use of callable agencies and how that how to really structure that and ladder that. So I must say that I'm very proud of their staff and the changes that they've made. And I'm really proud in being part and parcel of those changes because most of them we have brought to them.
What do you see as the advantages of, particularly when you think about cash flow? And I'm not suggesting that we're doing everything dollar to dollar, day to day, okay?
Yeah,
but
I hope not.
what are the advantages of going from a yield to call concept versus a yield to maturity concept in terms of cash flow and liquidity?
That's something that advisors toss around all the time. I think I would back up first and say, if you know what's going to happen on the call, that you absolutely know that bond's going to be called, you absolutely know that bond is not going to be called, then use the yield to call. But it's like the amortization. Many advisors and many systems will amortize to maturity a premium or accrete to maturity. And then they'll say, oh, there was a loss on it because it was called. We didn't expect it. We, in our systems, always advise people, we can do it either way, but we actually advise them to go to the first call and get all of the premium front end, that premium amortization or accretion, in order to give you an accurate picture of what's going on. I think if you I think you should use both of them. I think because it's like looking at a WAM and a wall, a weighted average maturity and a weighted average life. By giving you both of those, then you immediately see the impact of calls. And then you overlay that, whether you're on the committee or whether you're on my staff, you overlay that with your perception of what's going to happen in the yield curve. So I don't think it's an either or situation. I think it's information that's good to have in both ways so that you can actually see and interpret it as time goes by and as the yield curve changes over the maturity life of those securities.
Do you have a fair number of clients who say limit their list of investments from the perspective of those allowable under the PFIA?
Oh, certainly. We have a lot who, for instance, don't like commercial paper. Their boards don't like commercial paper, so that's totally out. There are very many that use commercial paper as 180 instead of 270 days. We have some clients who say, yes, I really like municipal debt. I understand it. We issue it. But I want a double A instead of an A. And many of them, of course, restrict complete classes of securities. So there's all varieties. And that's why I mentioned too that we keep matrices on in front of everybody so that we know exactly what your policy says and the restrictions that you have put on it. But we like to sit down also and talk through those alternatives right at the very beginning and on an ongoing basis.
All right. So all the arrows are in the quiver. Some of them you may or may not use.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you like doing your benchmarking? What's your philosophy towards benchmarking?
My philosophy is that a benchmark, especially for an operating portfolio, which you can't compare it to, you can't take Brazos and compare it to the city of Waco. They're different funds, they're different attitudes toward risk, they're different cash flows. What you have to really use here is something that is comparable to your cash flows. And your cash flow is what told you what your maximum maturity should be. It also told you what your policy tells you what your risk tolerance is, and therefore what your bellwether market is. Now, your bellwether market is the treasuries. And if your WAM is set at 1 year, then you want to use, I think, to be truly comparable is to look at the 1 year treasury, or if it's 6 months, it's a 6 month treasury. But it's not a performance for operating funds. I don't think this is a performance benchmark. I very much think it is a risk benchmark, because it's telling you, by comparing it to your bellwether market, it's telling you I'm staying right where my main market is, where it tells me to be. And then it also tells me where my WAM or my wall should be.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Any other questions? David?
Okay, we're at the 15-minute mark there. So Linda and David, thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you for the opportunity. And
Yes,
I hope
Anderson,
all of you are staying safe.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Let's take a break to about a 15-minute break then, and we'll start back up at 10:30 then.
Very good.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Should I drop off of this now, or do we stay on any longer? Okay, I'll go ahead and get out of here. And then,
Hello.
I'll reconvene the meeting and turn it back over to Chief Financial Officer David Thompson.
Okay, we have Hilltop Securities and I have Greg and Scott on the line here. And I'll do the turning the slides. At 11 o'clock is when we'll cut off for the presentation and then do 15 minutes till 11:15 for questions and answers. So I'll turn it over to you, Greg or Scott.
Okay, well, I'm going to start. This is Scott McIntyre. And if you'll go to the first slide beyond the title slide, I'll start. Okay, and I don't know how much of an introduction we need to give. I think you guys are probably familiar with First Southwest Asset Management, First Southwest, and of course, you know, we've since become Hilltop Securities Asset Management, and our parent is Hilltop Securities. We have actually been around, First Southwest Asset Management, Hilltop. It's actually been around since 1991. We focus exclusively on the public sector. You guys probably recognize a lot of our clients that we have. Currently, we manage a little over $17 billion, and we're investment advisor on an additional $7.9 billion. The difference there being that for investment management, we're actually executing trades, and on the advisory side, we're literally acting as advisor for several large entities. We're only separate portfolio management. We don't have pooled accounts, or at least Greg and I don't manage any pooled accounts. Everything is individual. You know, our senior management averages 25 years of experience. I will say that Greg and I have both been here for over 22 years. It'll be 23 years next summer. So there's a lot of stability. We also have a lot of depth that I'll talk about in more detail. And I think one of the real advantages to being on board with Hilltop is that we have access to the vast resources of the company. So, you know, we can talk to folks in municipal advisory and underwriting, continuing disclosure, get a lot of insight from our municipal group. And, you know, to the extent that we need things like credit research, we have that available to us. We have a large IT group, which is very, very handy whenever you do wind up and we have any type of issues. There's somebody right there, a large group. And, you know, we've got a large group of people who are looking over our shoulders, which I think is especially important right now. So the compliance group that looks over our shoulder at what we're doing is also, I think, something that our clients take a lot of, especially now, a lot of comfort in. Next slide. So we're full-time public sector management. We have 47 investment management clients, with 43 of those in the state of Texas. You can see sort of the breakdown of where those are. We actually have a large number, or a relatively large number of water districts and water groups. Trinity River Authority is one of our clients, Colorado River Municipal Water District, West Harris County Regional Water Authority. Williamson County is someone who's very familiar to you. We actually also manage money for North Fort Bend Water Authority. We're used to, you know, some of the challenges that I think face you in terms of cash flow and reporting, a lot of those other type things. Next slide, please. We do have a very experienced staff here. I mentioned it before. I'm a CFA, also a certified cash manager. I've been here, as I mentioned, for 22, going on 23 years, and I've got 32 years of investment experience, and 29 of that is in the public sector. I worked for the Texas State Treasury for a number of years, trading mortgages and trading on the run Treasury securities. Did the repo book. I did some oil hedging, a whole lot of things with the state. Really got an opportunity to deal with things well beyond, you know, what most folks have a tendency to do. Greg and I actually both worked in the banking sector before we eventually met up here. Greg has 29 years of experience. Those of you who may not have noted, Greg is also on the call with me here. 22 of that is in the public sector, which represents him here at Hilltop, formerly First Southwest. Dan Grant is our lead portfolio manager. He's got 29 years of experience, 11 of that are in the public sector. Dan actually worked for Fidelity for 18 years. And he's the one who is actually rolling up his sleeves and maybe the one who's interfacing with you guys on a day-to-day basis. Really good guy. All of us, I think, are easy to work with. Andrea Cash has been with us for 8 years. She works alongside Dan. She is on the trading desk now, as is Dan. Amber is someone that we had recently picked up who's just frankly brilliant. She sort of gives us that advantage to having somebody who's younger who knows how to put together pivot tables and write macros and interface with our Bloombergs and does a lot of the technical stuff for us. She is a portfolio analyst and looks at securities, puts together a lot of the analysis that's helpful to us, that allows us to make the decisions that we make. And finally, Jody Jones is the reporting manager, and she spends all of her time on that. She's got a reporting assistant who isn't listed here, but reporting is a big component to what we do. So we're PFIA compliant. In fact, the reporting system that we use was designed to adhere to all of the PFIA requirements. Jody's been here for 13 years, and if you guys decide that you'd like to hire us, you will be working with Jody on the reports. I will say that the standard reporting set, as I mentioned before, is robust, very accurate, very reliable. And again, Jody's the one who puts that together. But if there are additional reports that you need, we do some custom reporting for a number of our clients. Our goal in terms of reporting is to give you something in your hand that is understandable, makes sense. We like to be concise. We're not going to give you a whole lot of things that are not worthwhile. But I'm really proud of our reporting system that people administer that. So the next slide, please. Our investment approach, I looked at the folks that you're interviewing today. We're very familiar with both of those firms. And I think, for the most sense, we all operate in a similar way. None of us are Wall Street type firms. Greg and I have ties on today, but, obviously if we're not having an interview, that doesn't, it's not what happens around the office here. We have a very common sense approach. Our goal is for you guys to understand what it is we're saying. Our management style is conservative, I think especially now. Safety of principle is the primary focus. Spreads in, a lot of non-government securities have tightened up so much. You're not really getting much of an advantage. So in essence, what you're doing is you're taking on risk and not getting paid for that. And we're always aware of the risk versus the rewards. We feel like the last thing we want any of our clients to ever experience is being on the front page of the newspaper. We want to avoid that, and we have. During the 22 years that I've been here and Greg has been here, we have never bought a security that's defaulted. Every now and again we have something that goes on credit watch negative, and we're very responsive in terms of how we handle that. In terms of general responsiveness, we'd like to think that if you have an issue or you have some reports you'd like them to generate or just about anything else, we're able to get on it quick. We're well staffed. And again, that staff is consistent. We're not having people move in and out the open door. The folks you deal with are the folks who have been here for a long, long time. We emphasize diversification. What we're trying here really is to minimize interest rate and credit risk as best we can and balance that. You'll find that, for the folks that we buy commercial paper for instance, we have really stepped back in a way. We're limiting our own choices. And the reason we do that is primarily what you're seeing in the commercial paper space, as of, for instance, is a lot of European names. And as much as they may show us an attractive rate, we don't have any interest in that. We have been doing, and Greg will talk about it a little bit more later, but we have been doing some bank CDs more so than in years gone by. There are treasuries that make sense, there are agencies that make sense, but most of that is low credit risk. We do competitive bidding. Whenever you get a trade ticket from us, you'll see those competitive bids written on the trade ticket themselves. We have more than 20 approved broker dealers. We try to keep them honest so that if they're not showing us, good bids and offers, we'll replace them. So we really want to have the best, and really the fact that we have a vetted list really gives us a wide universe of choices for all of our clients. We continually, regularly monitor our client portfolio positions. Here on my desk, we actually have printed out portfolios for all of our clients. We also have the ability to be able to see that, obviously, on our computers. Sometimes it's just nice for me to have that, flip through and make notes on. We keep our clients informed. That's a primary goal. I think that, if you find out that you've been with us for a couple of years and you know it quite a bit more than you did when we came on board, we're doing something right. So, keeping you informed not only in terms of the securities that we're showing you, but also in terms of what's going on in the economy. Everything from the economic data to where interest rates are going to what the Fed is thinking are things that we try to get across to our clients. And finally, in terms of our approach and what makes us different, we have full transparency of our services and our strategy. Again, everything is explained. Everything is transparent. We're not doing anything you're not well aware of. You guys are looking for non-discretionary management. All of our clients right now are non-discretionary. And what that means is that we're talking, with you guys, we're talking about your cash flows, we're talking about the securities you bought before and the options you have in front of you. So, you'll never feel any pressure, but you'll always be well informed. Next page. So this gives you a glimpse of our broker-dealer network, who we're actually receiving our bids and offers from. And one of the things that we try to do is focus on those firms that carry inventory, the dealers, the brokers that do carry inventory, because we feel like that's not putting anybody else in the mix. We're not having a markup on top of a markup. And the highlighted firms here are primary dealers. One of the advantages, and I know you guys have worked with a investment advisor before, but one of the advantages is that the investment advisor gives you economies of scale. We deal with all of these dealers, broker dealers, on a regular basis. We see a lot of really good offers for our clients. And again, we're sort of tapping into these primary dealers that have a tendency to have the big inventories. Next page. I mentioned before, and I'll go into a little bit more detail, but we want to make sure that you are informed. We do that through bi-weekly client strategy conference calls. Greg and I host those every 2 weeks. We provide a slide deck so you can see what we're talking about. It's very interactive, includes our traders, and that gives them an opportunity to jump in and provide color. Greg and I add some anecdotal things that we have seen. We mentioned the other economists that we talked to. It is interactive, again, every 2 weeks, and we follow that up with a letter that summarizes everything for those who can't tune in. We also have a bi-weekly conference call with our economists that you're welcome to tune into. We provide a relative value report, which is a concise daily snapshot of the investment options. So whether you're in the market or not, you have an opportunity to see the best that we're seeing on any given day, and that's always helpful. And on top of that, we send out regular economic emails. I sent one out this morning on the retail sales report. They are brief. They're written in plain English. We recognize that your time is precious, and we want to make sure that you understand what you need to understand and don't get caught up in pages and pages of babble. Next page. Here is an example of what it looks like when it comes to you, that economic email. Move to the next page. The last thing that I want to mention before I pass this off to Greg is that we are deeply involved in public funds investment training. We participate in GTOT every year, and we sponsor that as well. Greg and I have spoke probably one of us every year for the last, I bet, 25 years, going back to my Treasury days. Greg's on the Education Advisory Committee for the Texas Association of Counties. I'm an advisory member for the National GFOA Investment Committee, which means that we write the best practices for GFOA. I've also spoken at the national conference for the last 6 years, and I don't know if it's even going to happen this year, but we're plugged in. We've also done workshops through GFOA and webinars for GFOA, so they do value our knowledge and experience. And then finally, we partnered with the University of North Texas Center for Public Management to present a series of investment training webinars. We recognize that a number of our clients had not been able to get their training this year, so we put together 10 hours. We've given the 5 hours already in September, the first 5 hours. The next 5 hours is available in October 23rd. If you decide you want to tune into that, regardless of whether you select this, you're more than willing to do that. So next page, and I will pass off to Greg with 15 minutes left, Greg.
Okay, all right. Well, thanks, Scott. I'm going to move on and briefly talk about the market environment that we're dealing with and how how that may affect the strategies that we would look to employ for Brazos River Authority. And of course, the key here is we're in a really uncertain environment. Obviously with elections coming up, there's been a lot of news around the political environment and whether or not Congress passes a relief measure, and some of those things have an impact on the economy and the investment market as well. And then, of course, the coronavirus COVID-19 has been the story of the year in terms of the economic impact. We've seen what through the summer was really a strong recovery from the early shutdown of the economy. But we have seen more recently signs that recovery is moderating a little bit. Now, this morning's very strong retail sales report notwithstanding. One of the things that you're probably reading about now is a K-shaped recovery. And there's a lot of discussion about the K-shaped recovery. And essentially what that means is that folks that tend to have more professional jobs and that can work remotely or from their computers at the comfort of their home have retained their jobs and are doing quite well. They're on the upslope of the K. In contrast, folks at the lower end of the spectrum, perhaps in service industries, working in hotels and restaurants, some of those areas where their businesses have been much more severely impacted, are on the downslope of the K. And that's driving some additional problems with inequality, and we're concerned about some employment conditions, particularly for those that are less well off. That's going to be a story I think we'll have to follow closely as we move ahead. In terms of the investment environment, yields across the curve are very near or at all-time lows. We note here that the 2-year Treasury note, which is sort of right in the heart of where we typically invest for our clients, was yielding 15 basis points at the time we put this presentation together, at 14 basis points as I looked here this morning. And even extending all the way out to the 5-year part of the curve, we're still looking at yields that are only around 30 basis points. So obviously a very low rate environment. The Federal Reserve has lowered the overnight Fed funds target to a range from 0 to 25 basis points. And unfortunately, it's likely to be there for quite some time. Coming out of the Great Recession, we essentially were at a zero rate environment for something like 7 years. And the Fed is indicating that they expect it will be at least 3 years this time. So, we're likely to be stuck at some pretty rotten yield levels for quite some time. We also are seeing some heightened risks of corporate and municipal downgrades. We don't have to worry about corporate issues too much around here. Scott mentioned commercial paper, which we do some of, very limited amounts for some of our clients. We're following those very closely, keeping an eye out for potential downgrades there. But municipalities, municipal obligations are a greater concern because the environment for them is very difficult. And that's particularly true for entities that are funded with sales taxes. Property taxes thus far seem to be holding up fairly well, but certainly we've seen a lot of municipalities with pressure on their sales taxes, and then of course those that are tied to revenues is another area. Probably read in the news and heard some of the stories about the New York Metropolitan Transit Authority, which is their big subway authority, and they are under extreme duress because of the lack of revenue. They're a very large municipal issuer in a lot of portfolios. So these are some areas that we're paying very close attention to and watching very closely. Our philosophy is that we really have to remain conservative in this environment. Preservation of capital is foremost objective, and it's really something that we have to pay attention to right now because there tends to be a desire to try to find some additional yield And that is the environment where folks will sometimes find themselves in trouble. They'll overextend, they'll add positions that are perhaps not quite appropriate for their primary objective. We just don't want to make mistakes in this environment. And then finally, we need to prepare for volatility. We've seen a little bit more volatility here the last week with the elections and the potential resurgence of COVID-19. Volatility is something we're going to have to be mindful of in the months ahead. Next slide, please. So that takes us to some specific recommendations for Brazos River Authority. We went through the investment policy, and we found that the policy is in very good shape, actually. It is certainly in line with GFOA best practices. It's in line with the Texas Public Funds Investment Act. There's no significant omissions. We would have a couple of recommendations surrounding the policy, one of which would be to consider placing an allocation limit on certificates of deposit. We did notice a fairly heavy concentration of certificates of deposit in the portfolio. There's nothing per se wrong with that, but they do have a lack of liquidity and some early withdrawal penalties. So we do believe that the portfolio might be better served with a little more diversification into other instruments. We also would suggest that the authority consider allowing direct investment in commercial paper. We here use a pre-approved list of approved issuers. It's a very short list, limited to the very top-rated issuers. We suggest a 5% per issuer limitation and a 20% overall limitation. Now, having said that, in the current environment, we don't find commercial paper particularly attractive, but there have been times over the course of the last few years that certainly made sense. We'd like to have that flexibility if the authority was willing to consider that. Next slide, please. Some other considerations. I mentioned diversifying the portfolio. We would prefer to see a larger allocation in high quality marketable instruments such as U.S. Treasuries. We'd like to see the introduction of callable agencies. These are issued by U.S. government agencies. They can be called prior to maturity. We're not talking about a huge allocation, but we have found in this environment that callable agencies do offer some additional yield and can enhance the portfolio yield. And then we also note, as I mentioned earlier, high quality municipal bonds. We do a lot of Texas municipal issuers. In fact, just this week we bought a school district issue with a permanent school fund guarantee, AAA rated municipal bond. And the yield on that was about 12 basis points higher than on comparable treasuries. It was a short year and a half maturity. So that's an area where we think we might be able to add a little bit of value to the portfolio. Spreads on commercial paper and agencies, i.e. the yield advantage versus treasuries, is very tight in this environment. And so we tend to have a more favorable opinion at this stage of U.S. Treasuries, full faith and credit, again, emphasizing safety. We would like to consider some longer dated callable securities. Some of your portfolios allow 3-year finals and some allow 5-year final maturities. But we do see some fairly attractive options in some of these longer dated callable agencies. Recently, a 5-year callable agency was printed at almost 60 basis points. And it provides about an extra 25 basis points of yield versus the 5-year agency bullet. So that's an area where we think we could add some value for the portfolio. You are obviously quite familiar with certificates of deposit. We noted that the portfolio does have a lot of CDs in there. And that is an area where, again, we're seeing some opportunities in this environment. We actually work with several of the same banks where you currently hold CDs. So that would be a transition for us both. We mentioned here local government investment pools. You all currently do not have a heavy allocation of local government investment pools. You're obviously finding more value in the insured cash shelter accounts and some of the other alternatives. But this is an area where we typically find clients have what we would consider far too much invested in local government investment pools. We would prefer to see people move away and look for some higher yielding options to the extent they can. And of course, I've mentioned longer maturity callable bonds. Again, it's important to us. We're not looking to make a dramatic extension of the portfolio's duration or average maturity. We would just like to be able to add a little bit of exposure to the longer end of the curve to capture some additional yield. We would still keep the weighted average maturity well within the confines of the policy. Then we've seen in this environment that there are a number of banks with some fairly attractive earnings credit rates, and to the extent that those exceed the other options, we do think it makes sense to carry a higher allocation in those accounts in order to offset banking charges. And we can move on to the next slide, please. Finally, I guess we'll just wrap up here. We've just got a few minutes left, and Scott mentioned this earlier, but of course, here at Hilltop Securities, we are a larger organization, or at least part of a larger organization. Scott and I like to think of ourselves as a small business. We have a relatively small group here in Austin, but we do have the resources of a much larger entity available to us. The company has a arbitrage rebate division that does arbitrage rebate calculations and reporting. In fact, over nearly 50,000 calculations have been performed. So we have professionals there. We have a continuing disclosure group that can assist with continuing disclosure requirements on bond issues. Our partners also run the Texas Short-Term Asset Reserve, known as TechStar, and the Logic government investment pools. So we're not directly involved with those in our group here, but the company does handle the customer service and marketing of those funds. Obviously, they give us access as well to their portfolio managers. We have a great deal of insight into how local government investment pools work, what's going on there. And then, of course, we also have a fully staffed structured products and debt capital markets arm. They handle things like flexible repurchase agreements, which could be a possible investment avenue for bond proceeds. They also do straight up repurchase agreements, guaranteed investment contracts, some other things. So there's a lot going on here, and I'm not saying that we do all of these or that you would be involved in all of these, but we do have access to these resources, the information that they have, and certainly if you had questions or needed to explore these kinds of things, clearly we can pull in the right people and put you in touch. So that's one of the advantages that you get with an organization like Hilltop. Again, Scott and I act very much as a small business entity, very highly focused on customer service, but we do have a vast array of resources standing behind us. And with that, I think we're just a couple minutes free, but we'll turn it back over and open it up for questions that you may have. Thank you all.
Thank you, Greg, Scott. This is Chairman Huber. Our investment policy, of course, which you've read and are very familiar with, is very at the very top is preservation of principal, and the last item in priority is yields. Our David Thompson and his team, of course, do not chase yields. I was interested in your comments on commercial paper and how it is a bit risky right now. But it seems like also you're recommending a little bit more risky portfolio than what we have had. Our people are very risk averse, and being public funds, we are under great scrutiny and not take any much risk at all. So anyway, I'll just bring that up. I don't really have a question on that, but you might want to respond to it.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
All right. Yeah, I don't want to create the impression that we're anything other than conservative and with you on that. We've done quite a bit of commercial paper that we feel like is very safe. We do short university commercial paper. As Greg had mentioned, we did some PFIA guarantee, our public, PSF guaranteed commercial paper, which we feel is not only AAA, but also with the guarantee is very, very appropriate. We like to have the option, but we're never going to invest in anything that we feel like is going to, put us in a risk where we have to answer to anybody. I mean, our reputations are very important to us, and we have not made a misstep of any kind. So right now with commercial paper, whereas several years ago when there was spread and when we didn't feel like the economy was in such an odd position, it might have made sense to us. But increasingly, what we're seeing in commercial paper is, the European banks, which we're not touching, a lot of names that we don't really know what it is they're doing with the money. But again, our preference is things like Toyota Motor Credit. We look at JP Morgan Securities when they offer commercial paper. There are a number of other familiar names that come and go. And again, the university paper to us when they issue commercial paper is attractive because we can see what they're doing. It's very public. We typically know that they've got large endowments. We have a good feel for what's going on in their states. So, I don't expect that we're ever going to be in a position where your portfolio appears to you as a conservative investor that the risk is increasing. But, I think as an investment manager, what we're asking for is latitude so that if the situation were to change and there are safe alternatives available and they can be discussed with you, then we can move into those type of things. Right now, we feel like, some of the local government, the municipal, the commercial paper that involves municipal governments and universities is probably safer than some of the bank CDs, at least in terms of default risk. So again, these are things that as we looked at your policy, we felt like this is something to consider. It's not something we're going to push because we're on the same page as you are as far as being conservative or feeling like safety principles there.
Thank you. You did say in your presentation that you're very conservative and safety principle is your primary focus. I can appreciate that. Other questions?
Yes, this is Sanderson, and I agree with you, Rick. I don't see any of these three firms as being what I'd call high flyers. So the whole concept of conservatism, I think, is kind of relative to what your whole situation is. And a lot of conservatism in a very narrow range, right? High flying can look like a lot in a narrow range when in fact it's not very much at all. Having said that, I have two questions. First, just it's not really a question. I just want to give me an assessment of the board of what you think the pluses and minuses are of the CEDARS program, not necessarily in today's environment, but in general. And if you want to apply to today's environment, that's fine too. But I'm looking more for general.
Yeah, and I'll start, Greg. If you want to chime in, you can. We like CEDARS. We love the idea of FDIC insured banking institutions. It feels like you get the diversification with the CEDARS. That program has been around for a long time. I will say that CEDARS rates right now are not anywhere near what they have been in days gone by. But there are some other shared deposit programs that have different names and sometimes different networks that we are looking at and will continue to look at. I think that's an avenue to go to where you do get, with some of these shared deposit programs, you do get additional yield, but you're not sacrificing safety. You are, depending on what the program is, you can have heavy concentrations of Texas financial institutions, which gives some people comfort. Others have diversification that extends throughout the states, which again is also very comfortable. But the FDIC insured portion of that, the fact that CEDARS has been around for a while, is something that we embrace. I will tell you that our clients don't have a whole lot of exposure to CEDARS right now. That's not because we don't like the program. That's because the rates haven't been there. And they'll return like everything else. It waxes and wanes. Sometimes CEDARS is the best game in town, and other times you have to sit back and look for other options.
Yeah, and I'll just add, Mr. Sanderson, I'll just add, I noted on your June 30 portfolio report that you had a fairly large allocation in the Next Bank ICS, which is the Insured Cash Shelter Program, which essentially is a CEDARS program for a demand deposit. And to Scott's point, we're pretty comfortable with those programs and how they work. The FDIC insurance and the built into that gives us a great deal of comfort.
Okay. And I gather that your use of commercial paper is really more from the perspective of having an arrow in the quiver for like little short-term slots, if you will.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I mean, number one, I don't want to leave the impression that we do a whole lot of commercial paper. I think the largest allocation we have in CP is approaching 15%. That's in a client that has $1 billion portfolio, and that's a client that has very short-term cash needs. So the maximum maturity ever in commercial paper is 270 days. Right now, we're limiting almost all of our issuers to a maximum of 180 days, and some to an even shorter 90 days. We have an approved issuer list that at its peak was about a dozen names. Quite frankly, right now, there's about 3 or 4 issuers that we're using in corporate commercial paper. Scott mentioned Toyota Motor Credit. JP Morgan Securities is another one. Royal Bank of Canada is another. All 3 of those are rated A1 plus P1, highest rating available. So again, we're not doing large allocations there. Scott mentioned some of the public entities which produce what we call municipal commercial paper. An example there is the University of Texas. They frequently issue short-term commercial paper, Texas A&M. These are a couple of names that we've done recently.
I can see one of those as being credit worthy. So.
We've
done a lot of Baylor University paper. Dan's son went to Baylor.
There you go. Oh my God. Here we go, boys. All right. That's all the questions that I had.
Any other members of the committee have questions?
Rick, this is Bill. Can you hear me?
Yes, go right ahead, Bill.
Okay. I was wondering perhaps it would be good if they address, since we have members that are concerned about security and all, what if either Scott or Greg would address the things they do to add value to the ability to assess collateral and decrease risk in that manner?
All the collateral gets handled on a case-by-case basis, client-by-client basis. It sort of depends on how things are collateralized. I have a city that's in your area that has a large Fannie Mae mortgage-backed security, a $45 million mortgage-backed security that more than collateralizes their deposits, and pretty much their bank allows to stay put. So they're, in some cases, 400% over-collateralized. Other folks have collateral that comes in and out of their account at the end of the day or during the day to collateralize deposits. And by the time we were to look at that, values will have changed and the bank will have changed that situation. We're seeing increasingly banks are using FHLB letters of credit to secure deposits. But regardless of how your financial institution is securing your deposits, we're more than happy to jump in, roll up our sleeves, take a look at that. We've got the ability to be able to price those in real time, provide you back pricing. We can weigh in on the appropriate collateralization amount or percentage with the institutions. We can help in a variety of different ways, but again, it's not, there's no template. All of our clients are different. All the ways that their deposits are securitized are different. And that's something we do have the experience, the know-how, and the willingness to help you with.
I would also just add, Scott, that since we do have Bloombergs, in fact, all of the managers, portfolio managers here have Bloomberg, which gives us access to, security level information, pricing information. So, if we were provided a list of the collateral holdings that are pledged, we can essentially look those values up on our Bloombergs and know in real time that whether or not there's sufficient collateral there. And in fact, we actually have the ability, if that information is provided in a spreadsheet, we have the QSIP number, we actually have the ability to sort of automate that process because we can automatically pull in the values into a spreadsheet from Bloomberg. So gives us a little bit more insight and allows us to easily monitor those values in that case. To Scott's point, it generally is more of a case-by-case basis. We have a couple of clients that are sending us collateral lists on a weekly basis, and we are reviewing those values on a weekly basis and then providing feedback to the client.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Well, seeing as there are none, thank you, Mr. McIntyre, Mr. Warner, for your presentations. And our committee will be making a decision today. We'll pass a resolution which will be presented to our board on the 26th of this month to finalize it, and we'll notify you guys. Thank you very much for your presentation today.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Welcome. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
All right.
David, do you have anything else?
No, it's just now, Rick, we need to go through and rank first and second, and then the default's third. And then we'll have a resolution here that we can read and the committee can adopt, and then we'll take it, then you'll take it to the board on the 26th.
Right.
David, this is Cynthia.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
So the last group that just spoke did some comparisons with our current portfolio and some possible recommendations that they thought we needed to consider, and recognizing that all of these work for us. What are your takes on the, I guess, while still conservative approach, but more risky recommendations, I guess, than that we've considered in the past?
Good question.
Like anything, I'm very familiar with the CD programs, and like they said, we do kind of have a CEDAR program, and that's with the Next Bank. And I did select Next Bank because it's a multi-billion-dollar bank. So even though it is $250,000 investments in FDICs, you're going to find I'm very conservative. And I'm not familiar with Hilltops and all the different investments they have. I could become familiar with it, but have not dealt in commercial papers and some of the municipal bonds and stuff like they have it. So in this market, I really don't. I'd have to do a lot of research to find out how safe they are.
And then the final question I have, they talked about the calls. And right now, it seems like we've worked to diversify that and have those calls on a several year out. And it sounds like they're possibly suggesting that we can do those in a shorter time frame. I mean, what is your take on that?
Yeah, I look very carefully at our capital spends, and basically our operating spends. As you probably know, we're going to have some very large, potentially large investments in the short term. So I need to be very careful. I know Hilltop was talking about 3 and 5 years. I am just at this point not comfortable with the 3 to 5 years right now. Most of my investments are being pulled back into the 9 months to 12 month and maybe even 15 months if some good rates out there. I'm trying to keep it within the goals within the FY22 budget to know how much we're going to have to spend in the next 12 to 18 months.
So I know you're very conservative for sure, and that's the way our portfolio has been structured. Let me ask you, the current firm that we use, Valley View, of course, seems to have the most conservative approach, but of course, they're managing our portfolio now. Both of the other firms seem to lean a little bit toward more risk. Valley View, having been with us since 2008, I believe, as
Yes.
our advisor, how have you been satisfied with them? Is there any major reason to make a change?
I've been very happy with their performance, but as I mentioned, the other two firms that we shortlisted are very qualified firms too. So I want to make that comment too.
And I believe that they are. They made great presentations. I read through their proposals and diligent.
Just Bill, let me, I've got some notes here on things, but just to get conversation going here, let me say what I really liked about Valley View. and that is that they seem to fit the investment to the cash flow need. Over a period of time, markets tend to be very efficient and always chasing that extra little bit of yield. There's usually some risk associated with that extra little bit of yield. There's gazillions of people out there making investments, and it's a very efficient market. And you have the Harvard MBA selling and the Yale MBA buying. So the way to come out ahead in this, in my humble opinion, as a conservative CPA, is to fit the investment to your cash flow need. Now, they do that by not having these callables out there. Yeah, you can get some extra yield, but what you're giving up for that is knowledge of when you're going to get those funds and be able to use them to meet your cash flow needs. So the challenge in this is cash flow. The challenge in this is knowing when you need to cash, and that's hard to know because, Ford will tell you that sometimes it rains and the construction goes behind and your cash flow doesn't go out when you thought it would. But that's okay. What's bad is when you don't have the money to meet your cash flow. And in order to keep doing, our business is to provide water, not to pick up an extra 10 basis points. And if you fit the investment to the cash flow need, then that's 99% of what we need to do. The other thing, and I don't think they addressed it a lot, when you talk about safety, these people do have to provide collateral for us. And I don't know, David, maybe you can address that and say to what extent you get help in that regard. But obviously, we've been properly collateralized all this time, because I don't remember, I've been here all this time with Valley View, and I don't remember too many butt whippings that we took. David, you want to address that?
Yes, and Valley View does do reviews and audits and making sure that we do have the proper collateral. And that is very important. I mean, we do a very good job at keeping up the collateral, but they're always looking up over our shoulders to make sure we have those collaterals in place. So that is a very valuable service that they do give us.
So good comments, Director Rankin. Presiding Officer Flores, we appreciate your comments on this. Any of the other two officers have anything they want to say to the committee on this? Director Taylor, Director Talos?
No, I was wondering why we switched back in 2008 from, to Valley View.
Born then, so I don't know.
No, I wasn't either, but I didn't know if
either.
because I don't believe in changing just for the sake of changing. David Collinsworth, do you know?
No, I don't have any history on that issue. Sorry.
Okay. Well, I would also like to note that on the second presenters, the partner that would be working on our account, his history is with the City of Houston and the Port Authority. And Sanderson, you may comment. I don't happen to remember that those two entities have done very well financially.
Well, I'll say this: the City of Houston has a strong mayor form of government. Okay, and I'll leave it at that. The Port Authority is a enterprise fund, just like we are. They're not doing so bad. A lot of their problems that they have are structural from a governance perspective.
Gotcha.
Have you noted that in both cases I haven't knocked staff at all? David, I hope you realize that. Okay, but anyway, I will say that I've seen I have personally seen the Port Authority do some pretty boneheaded things. We all know that the City of Houston is poorly run from a financial perspective. So I'm not going to lay that on the financial advisors at all. I will say this. I've got, being in public accounting, you see a lot of different players. You see the good guys, the bad guys, and the ugly, okay? I would probably not have Hilltop on my list. Not that they're good, bad, or ugly. I just think they would be third on my list for a variety of reasons. That leaves the other two. Both of them are supremely qualified firms. Both would tend to be pretty conservative, in line with what we're doing. Patterson, in fact, is the firm that replaced our incumbent in San Antonio, and they're very kind and didn't really take the debate that I threw out for them to say anything. But the San Antonio is happy with them within the parameters. There may be all three of the firms in one way or another sort of alluded to being maybe a little bit more nimble because of the environment that we're fixing to go into, okay, in the approach. I think that our incumbent maybe was a little bit less forthcoming about that because they know that we're stodgy, and I like stodgy. Stodgy's good, okay, because we're talking about public funds. So I don't want to see, David Thompson out there making speeches like he's coming out of the movie Wall Street or something, right? But
see him on the 6 o'clock news.
Read is good, but be that as it may, if it ain't broke, I'm not seeing any need to fix it. Both of the two firms that we just talked about, that being Valley View and Patterson, are fine firms. Is it sometimes good to shake things up a little bit and get a different viewpoint and perspective? Yeah, it is. But you know what? Based on our need set, I'm not sure this is a good time to be doing that. Or because really and truly, based on the parameters of our needs, I just don't really see where there's enough benefit to risk relationship in making that change to justify it at this point. That's my assessment. So I would probably rank the firms, if it were me ranking them, I would probably say Patterson, Valley View, and Hilltop, but there's not enough difference between Patterson and Valley View to make a change.
Let me add something on that. I'm very much, 1 and 2, I see it as Valley View and Patterson there. Let me just throw this out as a question, a concern that I have with Patterson. If you read Linda Patterson's history there, resume, it's extremely impressive. The other side of that is, to what extent is the firm reliant upon her presence? Do you have as much backup in that firm as you would with Valley View, who seems to have a few more people that know your business or are involved in it? I mean, that was a concern to me. As I said, she's had an extremely impressive career and is a very knowledgeable and successful and capable individual. It's just that, what's the backup there? And I don't know that was adequately addressed to me anyway.
Yeah. I agree with you, Bill. If you really want depth, Hilltop's where you go for depth. It's just that I don't want to be swimming with that many sharks. That's all. That's a very good point. It did seem like there was just a little bit more depth with the incumbent.
Director Crone, Director Boren, do you have opinions on this?
Yes, this is Gary Bourne. I didn't have the pleasure of hearing the first two proposals. I was on another conference call, so I apologize. But I do know Hilltop. I've worked with them in elected office of city and schools, and I have found them to be extraordinary in their services and guidance. And as you all know, security firms, they'll be as aggressive as you want them to be, or as conservative as you want them to be. They pretty much follow the lead of our perspective. And the current group that you have evidently does a great job. And because you look at the finances and where the Brazos River Authority is under David and our CFO, I mean, it's pretty astounding. So the only reason I would support Hilltop, just from personal experience, and secondly, I do believe, and especially in public government or one foot in the public trough, 1 foot in the private trough, I do think it's good to make changes. You said the current firm we had came with us on 2005 or 2008.
2008.
I just think it's just good business, sort of like changing auditors every 3 or 4 years. I think it's good to change security firms to get a new perspective and new view of the world too. So it's nothing against the current people we have. Certainly they're great. And, I didn't get to hear the presentation, and I look at the current work and I'd say it's great. But in my experience with Hilltop's been very, very good. And I just think they're a great firm to have to represent, and handle your security. So that's my perspective.
Thank you.
This is Judy Crone, and I would love to make a comment too, please.
Go right ahead.
In listening to all of them, I can understand our current one, Valley View, and I think they made a great presentation. I read through everything that was on our iPad to read through. The way they responded, and I think my responses right now are going to be more gut level, because you all have this whole CPA background, and my background isn't CPA. So I appreciated the way that they explained things to us and broke things down. Their presentation as a whole, Valley View, I felt very comfortable with. And David, I know that you all have had them for a while. I realize that they are our incumbents. Our other ones, Patterson,
Okay,
I was extremely impressed with the lady, with the woman. I think her gut level for me was she really gave me the feeling that she was ready to get on it and get moving, and that I got more of a hands-on feeling from her, because she kept saying, and I will be there with you, I'll be there with you. Then the third one, the Hilltop, one of the things that really stood out for me was how they kept saying, and we're conservative, and we're conservative. And it was in their original presentation, it was in their documents today, and each one of them in a very comfortable way. Those two gentlemen seemed to be the type that I would feel comfortable sitting across the table discussing money and money issues and investment issues. And I did, Ellen, I appreciate every question that you asked, especially about the cedars and all, because that gave every one of them an opportunity to define it in their own way and identify their own way of seeing it as a priority or an importance and how it could fit in. So I appreciate you asking that. If you all, and David, you all are the ones, I mean, we're involved, very heavily involved with trying to make sure that the money is there so the Brazos River Authority can move forward to do the work. If you all are comfortable with Valley View, and if you all feel like this isn't a good time to change, then I'm comfortable going with what you say. If you feel like it's time to change, it's a tough one for me between Patterson and Hilltop, because I'm about 50-50 on their presentations. I hope that's helpful.
May I make a quick comment for you, Judy? When these people look at our portfolio and look at our investment policy and strategy, it's got conservative written all over it. I mean, in giant red letters, bold type. And so they're going to look at this and say, these guys are conservative. And so if they're a good salesman, they're going to kind of come back around on that and kind of speak that back to you a little bit. Okay. So I don't always place 100% in what those people say when they say those kinds of things, but because this entire genre is extremely conservative, right? We're just on a very conservative end of that genre. So that's just a point that I'm trying to make, is they'll parrot you a little bit every once in a while if you let them. That makes sense?
It makes perfect sense, especially after all of my dealings through the years with let me take a step back. With school districts, with districts across the state, with everything related to UT Austin and all of those types of budgeting decisions. So yeah, and parenting is something that we see a lot of.
My wife's a teacher, and I'm sure you've seen. I wonder how many papers you've seen over your life that says, "Gosh, I think I said that in class about 6 weeks ago." Where'd that concept come from? Someone's fishing for an A.
Well,
Just a
rather
general
drag
comment.
things out too much, I think what I'm hearing from the committee is that Valley View is probably at the top.
Why don't we all just
The other
just all
two are
rank
kind
them?
of a toss-up, right?
Why don't we just all rank them and see how it plays out?
All right, go ahead. Judy?
Okay, I would say Valley View is number 1, and Patterson is number 2, and Hilltop is number 3.
This bill, that's my ranking also.
Alan?
I would say, oh boy, this is tough. Patterson by a nose, Valley View, and Hilltop a distant third.
Hey, Gary?
I would go Hilltop, Patterson, Valley View.
And I'm inclined to go with Valley View, Patterson, and Hilltop in that order. So where does that leave us?
Valley View.
Okay, so we'll need a motion then. I'll tell you, I'll make the motion and then we'll get a second and discuss it then. I'll move that we place Valley View number 1, Patterson number 2, and Hilltop number 3.
Second by Sanderson.
Discussion?
I'd like to say something.
Yes, go ahead, Bill.
Discussion, because this is a good thing to get on the record. First off, the hard work on this was done by the BRA. Our people went through, they looked at a lot more of these than we did. And by the way, we read through 371 pages. You know, you tell me, Judy, I think they're 3-hour courses that have less than 371 pages.
That's true.
So
they went through 7 different.
They went through all these RFPs, and by the time they got to us, there really wasn't a bad choice, and that's why.
Yes.
So I'd like to say that we appreciate the work that the BRA did in bringing this to us and doing homework ahead of time. And though I did comment on the length of what we were given, I thought all the information that we were given, and I did go through it, was very helpful. It really was. So I'm very appreciative of all that. And again, I appreciate my fellow committee members working through what is a difficult decision because you're deciding among very good options.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks to David and his team on that, because we all came to this meeting well prepared, thanks to their work.
Thanks. I appreciate
I will
it.
tell you, the worst option we had was extremely good.
Yeah.
So we're lucky.
That's
So
true.
let's vote on the motion then. Do I need to get Nancy to poll the committee on that, or we just do that ourselves?
I would say David Thompson should read the resolution.
That's correct.
Well, we got to decide if that's the way we want it, the resolution to read, right?
Correct. We can fill in the names later
I
here.
think we need to fill the names in first.
Okay.
Well, I mean, okay, my motion was, though, not the resolution. It was a committee vote on the 3 top, the 1, 2, and 3. Valley View, Patterson, followed by Hilltop. We seconded it, we discussed it. I think we need to vote on that, and then that will be, the resolution will correspond to that. Is that not correct?
Lorelei, let me ask for a point of order here. Because we have a motion, we need to fill in the names in this resolution and read it as the motion has been given and seconded. And if it does not pass, then we would go back and ask for another motion and change the names. Am I correct?
Yes, sir. The resolution is drafted as a prioritization of the firm, so that is correct.
So here we go. We're typing in the names now. So when you read it before you take a vote, then you'll have the names.
Make sure to put Valley View Consulting at the front too. Yeah, there you go.
Got it.
It's going.
Okay,
Another I'll
point.
read the
Those little
resolution.
details, you know.
Director Tallis, did you have a comment?
What
Go ahead.
was?
Patterson and Associates.
No, I'm fine.
Okay, I thought that was you talking in the background. I'm sorry.
No, this is Gary.
Who
Bourne.
was
This is
second?
a point.
Patterson was second.
Patterson and Associates.
Director Huber, Director Bourne is trying to,
Go ahead,
trying
Gary.
to add a comment.
That's okay. This is a resolution that will go to the full board. Is that correct?
That's correct. If we pass it, or when we.
Okay, I'm going to support it because I want what comes out of the committee going to the full board. I think it's great to have 100% of support behind it. I said my say. I didn't get to hear the two, but I admire the work that the management team at Brazos has done on all their finances, and and my reason for change is more philosophical than cognitive abilities here. So I'm supporting it. I just want to make that clear.
I understand, and thank you. And I wish you could have heard all the presentations, but I appreciate what you said.
Yeah.
Okay, if you're ready, I'll read the resolution then. Be it hereby resolved that the Administration and Audit Committee recommends that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority adoption of the following proposed resolution. Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby authorizes the General Manager, CEO, to negotiate and execute a contract for investment advisor services in the best interests of the Brazos River Authority with Valley View LLC Consulting for a 2-year period, with the option of 2 extensions for a total of 6 years. In the event staff is unable to successfully negotiate a contract with Valley View Consulting LLC, the Board of Directors authorizes staff to negotiate a contract with Patterson and Associates. In the event staff is unable to successfully negotiate a contract with Patterson and Associates, the Board of Directors authorizes staff to negotiate a contract with Hilltop Securities Asset Management LLC. You've heard a reading of the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Who is that?
Sanderson.
Okay. And second?
Yes, Rankin.
Rankin.
Motion was made by Director Sanderson and a second by Director Rankin. Please poll the committee.
Chairman Huber.
Aye.
Director Rankin.
Aye.
Director Bourne.
Aye.
Director Crone.
Aye.
Director Sanderson.
Aye.
Presiding Officer Flores.
Aye.
Director Tallis.
Aye.
Director Taylor.
Yes.
So there being 8 ayes and 0 nays, the motion passes. The committee will brief the board at the October board meeting on the discussion from this meeting. And now, if there's nothing else, we just need a call to adjourn. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn at this time.
So moved.
We get DoorDash for lunch or anything here?
We're waiting for Jeff Tallis. That's a Jeff Tallis call.
Yeah.
Who made the motion? Please. I mean, who made the motion, please?
Rankin.
Okay, and the second was it seconded?
Yeah, I was gonna say Crone will second it too.
Okay. Okay, motion was made by Director Rankin and second by Director Crone. All in favor?
Aye.
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 With no further business for the committee, we'll adjourn the meeting at 10:39, make that 11:39 a.m. And thank you all for your input and for your help and all of your time this morning on this. We really appreciate it. And thank you for the staff for all your time.
No, thank you.
This is not easy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A meeting like
Yeah.
this.
You have a good weekend.
Have a good weekend, folks. Thank you. Great to see you.
Good to see all of you. Have a good one.